Because we'll say.
Okay, I'll call the meeting to order. Lisa?
As required by the adequate notice, this meeting has been provided and in the express times and also posted in the municipal building on the same date. So we have a joint meeting tonight. And I will read the roll for Township Committee. Mayor Barsney?
Here.
Ms. McDermott?
Here.
Excuse me. Mr. Marqueta is not here yet. Mr. Baylor?
Here.
And Mr. Beam.
Here.
We also have Mike Finelli present, and are you guys expecting more?
No.
We have Bruce Williams, Chair of the Land Use Board, and also Bill Kenyon.
Please stand for flag salute. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just to make sure we can hear them.
Yeah, boo-boo.
But I can't tell.
Can they hear us now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear us, Judy?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Welcome tonight. You have the Township Committee and a couple members of the Land Use Board, engineer, and we're just here to listen to what you had to tell us about the Highlands Council.
Excellent. You ready for our presentation?
You
Okay. I know. Judy, are you able to load it up, so to speak?
That's fine.
Excellent.
Okay.
Excellent. So my name is Lisa Plevin. I'm the Executive Director for the Highlands Council. And with me, some of you know Judy Thornton, our lead principal planner and Highlands Council liaison to Greenwich Township. I'd like to thank the mayor and the deputy mayor for the invitation to come and speak with you this evening. And we appreciate the opportunity to discuss with the council and the planning board and members of the public a little bit more about the Highlands Council and what working with the council can mean to Greenwich Township. So just to go back a few years to the next slide, Judy. Thank you.
A little delay here.
No worries. A 2002 Forest Service study determined that drinking water for 70% of New Jersey's residents was at risk from development. And this study served as the foundation for the New Jersey Highlands Act, which was passed in 2004 to protect these resources. The Highlands Act divides the region into preservation and planning areas. It created the Highlands Council, and it directed it to develop a regional master plan to guide development and preservation efforts. A little known fact is our agency is actually called the Highlands Water Protection and Planning Council. And one thing that I really like to emphasize with folks is that it's important to remember that the goals of the Highlands Act were not just about protecting the water resources. They were also about protecting cultural, historic, agricultural, scenic, and recreational resources, as well as to preserve local character and economies. So the Highlands region consists of 88 municipalities, 7 counties, and is split roughly between the preservation area and the planning area. And the region accounts for 13% of the land area of New Jersey. Our agency is currently working with 62 of the 88 municipalities and all of the Highlands counties, including Warren County. And part of the reason for this success is that the Highlands Council has evolved over the last several years to be much more flexible, which is not something you hear often from a state agency. But we have recognized that no two towns or counties are the same and have worked to tailor our approach accordingly. And on this map that you're looking at, green is the preservation area and tan is the planning area. So generally speaking, development is more strictly regulated in the preservation area than in the planning area. And for the next slide, one of the most important things about what we're discussing and about our agency is that resources don't recognize boundaries on a map. And so a regional approach is what's required to protect them. And the more municipalities and counties that our agency works with, the better we can accomplish our regional goals, which is part of the reason that we're here this evening. So as I mentioned, the Highlands Act directed the creation of a regional master plan and a process for municipalities and counties to conform to that plan. And not surprisingly, we have discovered that there can be quite a bit of overlap between many municipal and county goals and the goals of the Highlands Act and the Regional Master Plan. And basically, any planning activities related to these areas can be funded through Highlands Council Plan Conformance Grants. And we like to emphasize that good regional planning protects both the environment and local economies. So one of the most attractive benefits of working with the council is all about money, not surprisingly. But one of the most important benefits of working with us is that your township would be eligible for plan conformance grants in any area that supports the goals of the Highlands Act and the Regional Master Plan. And these are non-competitive grants for soft costs, which essentially amount to planning, design, and engineering. And these grants cover a very wide range of projects. There's just a handful on the screen that you're looking at, and they include stormwater management, trails and recreation, redevelopment, historic preservation, again, just to name a few. In fact, one town that we're working with recently referred to us as free planners for the township. So Greenwich would choose the areas that you would like to focus on first. And this is what we're interested in hearing about as well. I understand from recent conversations with Deputy Mayor Beam that Greenwich is particularly interested in master plan updates and circulation planning. And these goals would absolutely align with the goals of the Highlands Act and the Regional Master Plan. And so most likely would be funded by our agency. Here you see just some additional specifics about our plan conformance grant program. It's non-competitive, as I mentioned, there's no match required. I like to call us one of the best kept secrets in state government, but if I keep saying that, we won't be such a secret. But nonetheless, I do think that, frankly, it's not very well known that we have this very robust grant program that typically aligns with the priorities of towns and municipalities in the Highlands region. And then lastly, here we go, a couple of very specific examples of some projects we've funded. I want to point out there that right in the center for Warren County is a transportation study that we funded. We collaborated with the county to fund this study of potential impacts of proposed industrial uses in Warren County, including numerous warehouses that were under discussion. And not surprisingly, this study determined that the potential long-term impacts of such development in the county would be substantial. So now I'm going to turn it over to Judy Thornton, our principal planner, and she'll continue with the discussion.
Thank you, Lisa. So just to zero in on Greenwich, as you know, you're mainly in the Highlands planning area. Only 12% of the municipalities in the preservation area. Your dominant land use is agriculture. By no accident, you have done a lot of preservation. Your preserved land statistic is pretty impressive. I don't know how many other municipalities can boast a number like that. A lot of that does include preserved farmland. So we do see a lot of opportunities for collaboration and alignment. I think your master plan and ours mesh really beautifully. You've actually done already, before Highlands even got here, a lot of the work. I see an awful lot of parallels, and I really do think we can make this work So here are just some examples of funding opportunities that I see right off the bat for Greenwich to engage in. And I'll let you know first that that beautiful picture is, of course, from your website. It's one of your lovely historic resources. I think it's the Kennedy House. It's just beautiful. Anyway, we will fund farmland preservation plans as well as ag retention plans. So that's actually going to projects and programs that you might like to plan for to help support the ag industry and retain the ag industry in your community. Historic preservation planning and inventories, scenic resource planning. And I'll mention that those three things, if you're interested, can actually be combined into or along with some tourism planning, if you're interested in that. Brownfield redevelopment planning, wastewater management plans, and circulation plans, of course, as Lisa mentioned, and any other updates that you really need. So plan conformance, you're pretty familiar with it, I think, because we did work pretty extensively back when you first submitted your petition. Basically, municipality petitions. We get that petition to a complete and final form where both the municipality and we are satisfied with it. And that's the point we didn't quite get to yet, but I think we will. Then there's a public process and a hearing. Our council considers it. Once it's approved, you dive into implementation. So the objective, of course, is to bring local planning documents and regulations into alignment with the Highlands Act and the Regional Master Plan. We help you do that, as you know, I think already, with model documents, a model Highlands ERI, Master Plan, and Land Use Ordinance. And I want to emphasize here that those documents are not meant to replace your materials. They're not meant at all to replace your planning program. They are meant and provided as supplements. So they're really dealing with Highlands resources, and they are intended to cover things that you don't. I don't know how much of that there really is. I don't know that there's much, but only to the extent that you are not covering those Highlands resources would the land use ordinance apply. Otherwise, we defer to your ordinance, especially if you have provisions that are more restrictive. So before I go off this slide, I want to take the opportunity to try to dispel the takeover myth. You may have heard that we like to come in and take over municipalities and their planning and zoning. That's not something we've ever done. It's not something we ever see ourselves doing. And quite frankly, there's no need. The only portion of the region for which conformance is required is the preservation area. And the preservation area is covered by the DEP rules. Those rules have been in effect since the act was passed. And they provide all of, or like 99%, 99.9% of all of the same regulatory provisions that we would otherwise provide. So we have no need whatsoever or resources, even if we wanted to try to come in and take over your land use. So this slide is just to show you, Paul asked this question, who is conforming in the municipalities around us? So the larger map shows you Greenwich and the communities that surround you, and everything shaded in blue is where there is an approved petition. The inset map shows you the region as a whole, so you can see how well we're doing. It's pretty impressive, we think. But if you look at that larger map, I wanted to just point out the preservation area line. A little hard to see, but it's the green dotted line. So you can see that some municipalities, like Lopatcong, have chosen to conform for both planning area and preservation area. Some have chosen only to conform for preservation area. Planning area is, of course, voluntary, and you can make that decision. Phillipsburg is 100% planning area, and it's a designated Highland Center. So to bring it sort of to conclusion, options and next steps. You obviously need to make a decision on plan conformance, and we just want you to know we're here to help in any way that we can to help make that decision. You may need more information. We're happy to meet with you further. We could meet with a subcommittee, whatever it takes. we would start by reviewing the old materials, and I would actually take those first and update them before you waste any time. We've had quite a few updates since 2012 or whenever we finished, actually maybe later than that we finished working with it last. You would pick up sort of where you left off with the municipal response phase. Now, that doesn't mean you need all those documents in a finished, final, ready to adopt form, not whatsoever. The response really would be your decision on plan conformance and sort of just a layout or a brief discussion of how you would go about it, how you would move forward to finish those documents. And we would be working together before we get there to make sure we're really, in cooperation and collaborative, and that we both agree and that you understand completely what you're getting into. We don't want to do this, as I said, by forcing anyone in. It's much better and more productive as a collaborative process. So the last thing, very important there, would be establishing your funding priorities. We would set up an implementation plan and try to do sort of an outline of a schedule. It would be long and include everything we can think of, but it's not intended to all be done in the first year. It's a multi-year process. And assuming all goes well, and hopefully it would, we then would take everything to the council. They would consider it and approve the petition. And at that time, you would be provided with a substantial budget to start with all of your priority items. Now, we lay that out over years. So you would start with what you think you could finish in the first year, and then we would add more later as you need it. So with that, I would like to open the field to questions.
You said the master plan, if ours is more restrictive, you would yield to our restrictions?
Anywhere that your documents are more restrictive than ours, they would apply. Anywhere that they cover more ground, so they may cover things that we don't, or they may be more restrictive, yours would apply.
So to that point, another council down the road wanted to override that. What kind of protection does the town have?
That's just never been something that changed. I don't know that they honestly could. That's the what we're looking for is conformance with the regional master plan. As long as you are meeting that plan or doing better than that plan, you're conforming.
Let me add a piece of information here. It's not something we necessarily advertise, but I think it's important to understand, which is that if for any reason a conforming municipality decides that they no longer wish to conform, they can withdraw their conformance status with absolutely no penalties. So I'm not sure if that was your question, but that is the situation.
That's your fail-safe.
Yeah.
But I'll mention right now, I'm aware of the, you made some zoning changes, I think back right about when the act was passed. You created your own Highlands Preservation Area district, and you have the RCD district, I believe it's called, with a 20-acre minimum lot size. So much of that, what we would label a lot of that area, not all of it, a lot of it is in our conservation zone. And our minimum lot size for septic system development would only be 14 acres. If you want to keep 20 acres, it's all yours. This is not going to be in the way. And
So that's where we would need guarantees.
I'm sorry?
We would need guarantees for something like that. Other than right now, we do this, but I don't know what you're going to decide to do in the future and how.
Well, okay, I understand. Here's the thing. Anything in your ordinance is basic. It's your ordinance. We can't change your ordinances. We would change, the only ordinance we could change would be the Highlands ordinance provisions. So if you have an ordinance that's more restrictive, we're not ever going to touch that. But we could certainly arrange for some sort of guarantee. No problem.
But again, there was a fail-safe put in by the legislature in the Highlands Act in the event that a community that was conforming for whatever reason wanted to stop conforming, and they can withdraw from conformance with no penalties.
I think there's also even, I'll look for it and see if I can find it for you. There may actually be language regarding that allows municipalities to be more restrictive. There was never anything that required that you be less restrictive in order to be consistent with the regional master plan, none whatsoever. So I'll look for that and see if there's actually language to that effect. But absolutely, as Lisa said, otherwise you always can pull out for a plan conformance.
Give us a certain budget that we get to use and we could pull out the next year and use that money.
We wouldn't leave all that money with you. The way it works is our grants are all reimbursement based. So we would set up a budget as you work on items. We would work through each grant individually, and we reimburse once we have grant deliverables. We approve scopes of work. So you would start with, say you did a stormwater management plan, we would start with a scope of work from your engineer, laying out what would get done, what the costs were, time frame, and so forth. And as the pieces come in, as long as they are coinciding, with the scope of work, as long as they're doing what was promised, we then pay for each component once it's in and done.
Right, and if a municipality is not conforming, they would not be receiving plan conformance grants.
Anyone else?
We even, add one other little thing. If it happened that you decided to retract your plan conformance in the middle of that process, we would pay for whatever deliverable you had at the time. If it's finished and provided, we would pay that out and then close everything up.
Bruce or Bill?
I guess my question would be Mike, just because Mike has been involved in it so long, and the only guy who has been is, were there any sticking points that you're aware of when we kind of stopped the process?
There was a whole list.
No, there was a few things.
There was a whole list. That's what I asked you to get that. Did you find it?
Wastewater management planning was clearly one of the main items we were concerned
Or
about.
did you ever find that list? Of-
I started looking for it. No, I never did. I need to continue though, because that was after the last meeting, so.
There was a letter put out time. Of all
I
these-
think we have, we definitely have a letter, I think, from Mr. Finelli that may have been in response to the, when we did our master plan reexamination. He had a number of issues with the regional master plan that he was hoping for changes on. I know we have that. And what I recall mainly was that I know Greenwich wanted to be more restrictive, significantly more restrictive than we were able to be in the Highlands land use element. And as I said, that's permitted, it's perfectly fine. We need to be able to support the Highlands land use element and the Highlands master provisions, land use ordinance provisions. And we actually, when you conform, we give you a promise that we will defend those in any legal challenges that you have in a development application. So we were only comfortable defending what we can support based on the regional master plan. So if your provisions are more restrictive based on your master plan, it's perfectly fine. But we can't support those. You would need to defend any of those.
My recollection, this is going back, and Mike can correct me, was that since most of the town was in the planning area, we were concerned that we would be pushed into more development than what we really wanted. Isn't that
There was a,
basically it?
well, I just want to let, the letter was from a Mr. Balzano, who was the consultant hired at the time. It wasn't from Mike. And that, as far as I understand, that was never resolved, any of the issues on the letter, which is why the town stopped pursuing it. And I think the major issue was home rule and control of our zoning. That was the major stumbling block. Was, there were no guarantees at the time. Now, you're saying there is now. We'd have to have our lawyer look it over, but
Guarantees for what, though? I don't understand what your question is there.
the guarantees that they will overturn our zoning at the time. That they couldn't.
That's the rule, right? Ours will supersede any of yours, correct?
Yeah, if you're more restrictive, it supersedes. And in fact, there's language right to that effect up front in the land use ordinance provisions. It gives you an applicability section. And right up front at the very outset, it
You're a
indicates
lawyer.
that the ordinance is a supplement, that it only applies to the extent, actually, it's basically says that it's the more restrictive of the two shall apply. So
If
if
ours
you're-
is more, you won't defend ours, but you're defend yours, right? Is that, or as
If
long
we
as you,
were- if we were called on to legally defend an ordinance, it would have to be a Highlands ordinance, and that ordinance is built on the regional master plan. And I mean, I'll tell you right now, I agree with you that some of the provisions in that we've come up with are not super restrictive. So if you want more restrictive, stronger provisions in your own ordinance, that's the place to put them.
anybody else have any?
Well, I think there's some concerns, and maybe we start with, if we can resurrect Mr. Bolzano's letter.
Yeah.
To find that, and then
Yeah.
see how the new rules now, or the way you're approaching it now, has changed versus then. And if we can address those issues, that would seem like we might be able to move forward with something.
Yeah, that's what I asked Mike. to try to find out.
I think I will be able to locate it. I wrote myself a big
I'll
note
even
here.
try. Might have it in my email. somewhere.
No, and hopefully as soon as I find it, I'll obviously distribute it to everybody.
Well, is it possible that this letter we're looking for is also tucked away in the Highland Council's folder?
I'll look for that too. I'll be honest with you. I don't recall a letter from Mr. Balzano, but I think he had comments throughout the documents. So when he did reviews of the land use ordinance and master plan, he basically gave us his input through comments. I don't know if there was a summary letter. That would really be helpful. We could address that and go through each thing much more easily, one by one, and explain how we could deal with it. And I'll tell you, if you cover things and you're more restrictive in your ordinances than in ours, the ordinances, the Highlands ordinance could actually be changed to just have a little placeholder that indicates that the provisions of this section shall rely on X section of the Greenwich Township Municipal Code. We would just need to see those. If you changed your ordinances and made them less restrictive than Highlands, we would be concerned, and we would need to see that and deal with it, and you may not be in conformance anymore, but it doesn't sound like that's going to be our problem whatsoever. But we'd be happy to go through those with you.
So we'll look for documents from Mr. Brozano. If the township officials could do the same, then whoever finds them first, let's share them, and we'll see if we can work on getting you some responses.
Just one last question, I'm sorry. Find that our ordinances are more restrictive. What benefit does the Highlands have having us conform to the Highlands plan? Already, like, why would you give money to a town that's even more restrictive than the Highlands? Like, it doesn't make sense to me.
Oh, because you would be even more interested than a lot of others in the region in advancing everything that the Highlands is about. We would support you in all of your efforts, which are vigorous. We would support you in every one and we wouldn't have issues. Usually it's the other way around. Municipalities want to do a lot more than the Highlands provisions would allow. So we're usually saying, no, you wouldn't be able to do that. You wouldn't be able to grow there. You know, everything is sort of they feel like they get a lot of no's. We try hard, but there are limits. So in your case, we'd be able to fund you for projects that align beautifully with the regional master plan and would further our goals tremendously in everything that you do.
Yeah, I'm going to guess that our issues won't be with the preservation area, but rather the planning area and being able to maintain maybe more restrictive in the planning area than you would be.
Well, we would have no problem with that. we can definitely work that out. If that's the biggest stumbling block, that's just not a problem.
Right.
Lisa,
And
Judy,
just to go back to the question right before this, I mean, the bottom line is one of the main reasons our agency was created was to support municipalities and counties that want to do as much as they can to protect the resources of the Highlands region. So the fact that your township would be going above and beyond many others means that, you know, we would want to support you in whatever way we could, financially, with technical assistance, et cetera.
okay, we have this meeting starting at 7, so we're going to hard stop, Lisa and Judy. Thanks for your presentation. You're going to look for your letter, we'll look for ours. The land use board will come up with questions of their own. We may come up with questions of our own, and I think it was in your list here. We're going to have future meetings to further discuss things.
We'd be happy to.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. You too.
You too.
Good night, all.
Good night.
I'm going to make a motion. We open public comment. Some people came in late. Anyone second?
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody have any public comment strictly on this Highlands presentation? None of you were here for it, but I just want to. Seeing none, I make the motion. We close public comment. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I'll make a motion for adjournment. Remember a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.